Welcome to My View from the Piano Bench. We do this on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. here on my Joel Holt's Notes YouTube channel, in addition to Piano for My Friends on Thursday evenings. You don't have any idea what's swirling around in my head or my life. But I wouldn't have it any other way. And I couldn't, and I wouldn't know how. And maybe that's going to wind up being part of a theme here. Look at this mess up here. Now, I'll talk about that in a second. Thank you to those of you who support and encourage me via the links you'll find on the support page on my website, and you'll see a link to that page in the video description. There are different, essentially, drop in the tip jar options, including a Patreon option, which is predetermined, drop in the tip jar once a month. Regular support such as that will elicit from me a thank you email each month with exclusive content that no one else will see. So every Wednesday night, this is Wednesday, and it actually is, literally as well, not always the case because I record these ahead of time. And on Wednesdays, I like to talk about perspectives or thoughts or ideas about making music in a way that hopefully can speak in some way to everybody, whether you're a musician or not. We'll see how that goes. I think this is one of those days where my musical communication might be better than my verbal, which is the opposite of the ideal for something like this. So each time I have a topic, and lately, really this year, I've changed things up so that I don't predetermine what I'm going to say or even where the topic is going to take me. So I may have a topic and it may take me just completely somewhere else, and I won't know till I get there. So I'm treating this like my musical improvisation. I think it takes it to a better place. And actually, people who watch have agreed. So we're going to continue to do it. And this time, the title is something that you might think I'm declaring or saying. And actually, I'm quoting somebody else who said it that had me just go, and it's had me go, ever since. And it opens the door to a lot of things to discuss. And that happened on a gig where we played a particular tune, and then the bass player in the gig proclaimed that tune the most dangerous tune in jazz. And there's the topic. Now, I think today is also going to potentially illustrate some of my idiosyncrasies, because this is kind of who I am. And I actually left the top of the piano a complete mess on purpose. I came across some meme on Facebook or the internet, maybe it's just this morning or last night, about clutter equals trauma or something. And and I get it. And I think it's related to me saying I love structure, especially when people provide it for me, because I can't provide it so well for myself. And the idea of at-work clutter, and like I say, to the extent that you can see this, it's more as an illustration. There's almost always stuff on this shelf. That's an advantage to me having an upright piano. It has a shelf, right? Because don't all horizontal spaces become shelves? I'm looking around my room where you can't see. Okay. But as I see that and I understand my musical tendencies and my deepest intuitive tendencies and outlooks and everything, I go back to that, and you've heard me say this many times, that book title. If I ever write a book, it's going to be called Everything I Ever Needed to Know in Life I Learned at the Piano, right? And as a result of taking the lead with this expression in my entire life, putting myself in the space to do this before I do anything else, I'm kind of opening myself up to this go everywhere at once thing all the time. And if you want to have not clutter and you want to be uh, organized in the way it's typically understood, you would have a more kind of linear approach where you handle this, you take care of this, okay, then you handle this and you take care of this. And if I do that, now this is, I would absolutely get challenged by some people, by this, and I understand it, and it'll never get resolved. I think this is all of us learning how to be ourselves. That's the bottom line. And we all have to authentically be ourselves and be the best ourselves we can be. Does that involve clutter? I think in my case, probably so. Now, ideally, this gets managed and it doesn't look ridiculous, right? What does this have to do with the most dangerous tune in jazz? Did I mention ADD? Hopefully we get to that. But anyhow, like I said, hopefully this doesn't look ridiculous. But in terms of me having the depth of expression, getting to that place, that deeper place, that place that is authentically me, I have to leave those systems and go to the other place. Now, I am not equipped to talk about this because I'm just learning, and a lot of things I shouldn't even try to talk about. Like I shouldn't act like I'm a teacher about something that I'm a student of, and maybe a very beginner student of. But then if we're honest, aren't we all students? And aren't we all at very beginner stages of everything if we really see the landscape? Yes, this is an esoteric day. Right? So I just feel like leaving clutter up here is appropriate. And no, I wouldn't call it trauma. I'd be interested to read that. And I know there is the balance of, having everything organized and having access to everything, that's just right there. I remember a friend years ago, decades ago, that I talked to about ADD that kind of helped me to accept putting that label on myself. Well, actually not putting it on, going to my doctor and saying, and he said, yeah, right? And when he talked about taking the medicine, in his case was Adderall. No, it was Ritalin. He was doing Ritalin. Taking Ritalin, prescribed. Anyhow, what he talked about it is that what it did was it took everything that was swirling around him and brought it within reach. So he could choose to take something and then do with it, and then put it back, and then take something else. Otherwise, he couldn't find it. And that's an interesting and I think helpful way to look at that. And that's basically what I try to do, is acknowledge the landscape all the time. And then at this point, without the aid of Ritalin or Adderall, and just stay connected. I think this is the part that's a little different. Stay connected to everything while I go into that one thing. So right now I don't look at it as that I'm taking something off a shelf and holding it. I'm looking at it as I'm entering the big picture that I'm seeing all at once. And staying connected to that big picture, I go inside of it. And then I'm at a particular point and I am dealing with whatever I'm dealing with while I feel still connected to everything else that's connected to, which is ultimately everything else. Boy, what a start for the most dangerous tune in jazz. Oh my goodness. Now, I was trying to keep in my head what the other thing was that I was mentioning. About my idiosyncrasies. And it was very much at the top of my head, but I purposely didn't write it down. I guess I'm getting to idiosyncrasies anyway. Because I found with doing this that if I write it down, it pulls my attention when I look at it in isolation, away from the big picture, right? And I guess what I'm saying, and I know what I was going to say, hopefully I remember, but I guess what I'm saying is that when I look at something and go to it, rather than go through the big picture to it, then I see it more in isolation, and it disconnects me from everything. And that's really what I'm finding more and more doesn't work for me. So I'm going to it. And wouldn't you know, I couldn't hold on to both things on my head at the same time. Because I really wanted to finish my sentence. I didn't want to say, hey, I'm going to say this now. But welcome to my brain. And maybe I should just keep talking like this and call this thing Welcome to My Brain. I'm going to play a little bit. And then hopefully I'll come back to that other idiosyncrasy. Let me think. But actually, that could be a little illustration that at a certain point, I let go of the concept of what I was doing, and it ran on its own. And when it runs on its own, it finds those places that I don't have access to, but I do. So, we'll come back to the other thing. I do have to let it go. And talk about the most dangerous tune in jazz. Or the concept of the most dangerous tune in jazz. Now, this is related to something I talked about a few weeks ago, where a listener here, watcher, viewer, made a comment about me being more attached to the melody of a song when I improvise, thoroughly attached, than anyone he has heard. And I understood what he was saying, and I talked about that to a friend of mine who really, really pushed back. And I understand why. Because he was holding on to, well, all good musicians do that. You can hear that in this playing, and this playing, and this playing, and this playing. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not his point. And what I take that to mean, or understand it in terms of, is that I don't reharmonize tunes as a matter of practice. I don't like recalibrate harmonically songs, which has become really a standard thing in contemporary jazz and post-pop jazz. Because it's not just about like the creative melody you play, it's the creative harmonies you create. And when you create those creative harmonies, you disrupt the connection to the melody of the song, or at least you obscure it, you make it harder to find, because the melody of the song creates the structure. So if I am more or less true to that structure when I'm improvising, the melody of the song is very likely going to be there to be found. And so I think it's really what he's describing to me is like a magic skill, and he may have said it like that, is really like a version of being old school. It may be in a particular way, where it was just about playing a tune. Because like if you listen to the old players, you know, the pre-bebop players, the Goodman era, Benny Goodman era stuff, and you're more inclined to be able to tell where you are in a tune and hear the melody than you are with a contemporary player. And that's not good or bad. What this person was saying is that it is bullseye for him, and also a bullseye for me. It's just the nature of how it all evolved. Now, what's that big long setup for? Quite a long setup, actually. So we're on this gig, and I'm on this gig, and I was called by somebody else, and that particular person and I have a particular rapport. He had a bass player on the gig, you know, so that bass player is coming from a whole different place, you know, conceptually in jazz than I do. I'd say my friend who called me is somewhere in the middle, right? And it pulled the whole thing somewhere else because it's the, you know, consensus and the combination of things, you know, when you have multiple people making music together. And in the contemporary jazz sense, like I said, part of the allure, or part of the skill, or part of the challenge, or part of the fun is how much you can change up a tune harmonically. And Somewhere Over the Rainbow was called, and you know, I'm aware of some of the things that happen to it, you know, but let me see if I can play it more or less straight. I should have like original sheet music. Now here's something interesting. When I said ooh, see, I was trying to keep myself from playing anything but like the basic chords that were original to the tune. And I played the basic chord, but I added a seventh or something, and it just like triggered this thing in me that after that, very subtle, but after that, I didn't quite stay between those other lines because I was moving things around. And like I said, that's part of jazz. But in contemporary jazz, you really push the envelope, right? So what happened in that tune was we started playing, and then one of us like went one place, and then the other of us, or somebody else, went somewhere else, and we spent the whole time, every time we went through the tune, circling each other. It's like, okay, we're landing here, and then we're over here, and yeah, let me just give one example. Right there. Or really subtle. Now, I don't want to get too technical or wonky in these videos, but I mentioned the concept of 2-5 before. And that little theoretical configuration is kind of the center of jazz theory, at least in the traditional sense. Contemporary musicians kind of argue over it now and say that it's not relevant, but then other contemporary musicians say it's very relevant. But like the first thing musicians will want to do to that tune is take this second chord, which I'm in E flat, so it's a C minor, so it's a sixth chord, and change it to a 2-5, a minor 2-5. A minor 7 flat 5, G 7 flat 9, to go into that same G minor chord. Right? But go this way. Now something different. Now, those extra things I did are really mild by like contemporary jazz standards. It just goes all over the place. But for me, that's a lot of color compared to, the original. And his saying most dangerous tune in jazz was making comment that that tune just lends itself to, he wouldn't have put it this way, I'm going to put it this way, agendas and reharmonization that might be individual to us, and it's hard to find a consensus. I guess that's what it is. And he's not wrong. But the thing that really tripped me up about it is most dangerous tune in jazz. Wait a minute. When did Somewhere Over the Rainbow become a jazz tune? That's what was messing with my head, right? And I now remember the second idiosyncrasy. I wanted to do this video today because I wanted to hear myself talk about this. Because when I hear myself talk about this, I really get a better sense of what I'm thinking about it. Now, maybe that makes sense and maybe it doesn't. But, when you have, it's difficult for me to unpack the sense I have about things, especially when I'm writing it down. Those blog entries I do, which now is like once, twice a month if I'm really, they take a ton of time because to take words and make those words express something that we're not holding in words is difficult to find a path to, and can be really excruciating and take a lot of patience. And sometimes it comes and you have to be with it when it does. It's related to the playing, but different. If I'm talking about it extemporaneously and I don't have the process of that kind of organization of writing and waiting and thinking and stuff, and a lot of times stuff will come out of my mouth that it's a more direct connection to whatever's inside. And once you hear it, it's funny, like when you feel or think something, it's one thing. When you hear it said, including and perhaps especially when you're the one saying it, it connects it in a different way. So I wasn't even sure what I was going to say about this, other than the idea of reharmonization and the thing about Somewhere Over the Rainbow not being a jazz tune. But of course it is a jazz tune. But why? But because everything could be a jazz tune, right? Let me see. For some reason last night, was I on a gig? Yes, of course. I was on a gig last night. And Oh My Darling Clementine just came to mind. And I had to write it down to remember. It goes... Go on. Ooh, all right. I'm glad that happened. Was hoping something like that would happen, and I let that go. So, is "Oh My Darling Clementine" a jazz tune? Well, some people would argue it's that jazz. Well, certainly improvisation. What defines improvisation? All of that. Uh, and so, I guess anything can be a jazz tune. So maybe I shouldn't be upset that he called "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" the most dangerous tune in jazz. But I mean, that's just like, it's almost like, you want to give it some reference. Yeah, okay. It spins back to when I went to a Chick Corea solo concert, and everybody wanted him to play, I think, Spain or one of his tunes. He wouldn't do it because what he said was, you know, all I'm going to do is use it as a vehicle for, improvise, and I'm not really honoring the tune, or something like that. He didn't want to mess with his own tune. Of course, anybody else's tunes are fair game, right? But his were sacred space. Now, of course, he will improvise on them in other shows all the time, but he didn't want to do it then. But it was like an interesting window into the psychology of like showing deference to something, or revering something. Reverence is what I was trying to say. It's like, right? So a little basic pure release thing. I'll use that as the vehicle for improvisation, but I'll come right out and say it. And other people would say, no, you're not playing Fury Release if you're not playing it the way Beethoven wrote it. Well, it still kind of sounded like Fury Release, right? So you just get in the weeds with all of this. This is now taking my mind to, and I'm trying to say this, I haven't said this to anybody, but I've thought about like how I could illustrate improvisation related to philosophy and maybe even theology, being understood symbolically rather than literally. And how do you navigate that? And my understanding, I don't like that word, but understanding would be that we all have our perceptions, and some people are more concrete and more black and white and more prone to the literal and, acceptance of something, or playing the sheet music the way it is, or else it's wrong, right? And others of us see things in terms of their meaning, right? And the meaning takes you to the meaning doesn't change but what houses the meaning, right? Can I want to say can change. It's just the meaning evokes stuff, and like an illustration would be. It's funny the things that go through my head. Stuff goes through my head all the time. Don't want to, let me just pick a hymn. All right. So this may be a bad illustration, but I just opened this hymnal. And I made myself do something that is not my first inclination, but I need to practice doing it, which is read the notes that are on the page. And I think I actually read them all correctly. I didn't do a real good job pianistically. I didn't bring out the melody very well, but I'm still not doing a great job, but a little better. That's slightly better. Because a hymnal is not keyboard music, piano or organ. A hymnal is choral music, 4-part harmony, and organist and pianist play it as written because people need to read music, right? But it's actually written for singers. But if you saw this and you said, okay, that's C key first. If I start making changes, is it still C key first? Very subtle changes, like some of those repeated notes. Hit you over the head. I think that little change makes it nicer. It makes it more flow across the page. Not so many bang, bang up and down. Because you're not singing those words with every part. The singers are, they have to, but we're not with the piano. So, C, ye, how about C? C, as opposed to C. Yeah, that's like the old image of, somebody's really nice old aunt in some country church who's been the piano player there for 150 years, and everything is up and down like this. Of course, a contemporary church is not applicable, but I mean, those of us who are old enough, right? We know situations like that, and you got to interpret a hymn, understanding it's choral music. But the point I'm making, which is, I guess, kind of silly in one way, but bear with me, is once I move away from playing exactly what's written, am I still playing C key first? What defines C key first, right? I think I've stumbled onto what I was hoping. What defines C key first? That whatever you do to it, if it still carries that melody that you can access, it's still C key first. Can we agree on that? Now, when I would think in my mind to do this in a setting where somebody was strictly saying you can't improvise, I would use a hymn not like C key first. I'd use an old hymn like A Mighty Fortress Is Our God or Amazing Grace or something, and then start playing it differently and seeing, at what point is it not that. But I think we can agree with this. as long as you can sing that melody and you can put those words to it. Something. Now, I actually departed in this last phrase from the melody completely, but just slightly. But not, I did something different. You probably still felt I was playing C key first, right? I was just taking a little liberty. So let's take a learn a little bit. Let's move the key. Let's put some time to it. And as I reharmonize it some more, but still sounds like the tune, right? And even though you might not have been able to sing the words, or not, don't say it like that. You might not have been inclined to want to sing the words, right? At that point, maybe so, maybe not. You were still connected to the song. You weren't like all of a sudden confused and think I was playing, London Bridge is Falling Down or something, right? Let me stray even further. Oh man, all kind of stuff going on there. But the point that I'm led to make right now is just because you depart from the original chords or the original idea of the melody, that's not a bad thing at all. It's really about consensus, and it's about our individual expression. Now, when this person was saying "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" is the most dangerous tune in jazz, and I'm thinking about it in terms of, I'm thinking about it while I'm doing this, and yeah, there aren't places that invite ambiguity here anywhere like there isn't Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And I think it's, starting with that first thing, and you just want to do something, right? But it just extends throughout the entire tune. So in that regard, if a tune is about, and I think this is the bottom line of everything every subject I'm talking about, it comes down to this, that if the objective is to see how far you can push out envelope, that's one thing. If the objective is to be true to the tune, that's another thing. And then we define, and it's going to be, discussion about what does it mean to be true to the tune. And the two subjects that I wasn't planning on bringing together, but they came together, of musicians finding consensus and improvisational freedom over a tune. And the idea of a listener being able to have access to the melody within them during the improvisation, no matter what, those two things can be in tension with each other. And it can maybe define the nature of the kind of musician you are or want to be, or why you're doing this, or what do you aspire to as a musician. So I'll often say this, and this is completely applicable in this situation. Jazz musicians, those who are knowledgeable, know tunes, know what to do. Because if you're like a good jazz musician, you're a good musician. You understand stuff, right? And it's the good jazz musicians who are often out there doing the commercial gigs, because they have all the skill set to fall right into it. And this might not be entirely comprehensively accurate, but let's just go there for now. Let's call accompanying a singer a commercial gig. Let's say the fine singer, I love accompanying singers, right? And you're playing a gig, it's a great jazz singer to say, but you're in that role. You are like in the role of defining the tune underneath this singer and going with them where they go. But you're in this structure, this interpret the song structure, right? And what I'll often say is that most jazz musicians who accompany singers, almost all that I'm aware of, but I won't say all, but I'm going to say most, but the vast majority, enjoy those gigs, appreciate those gigs, really good at those gigs, but they look forward to when they get to go to like a jam session gig or just a straight out jazz gig where you're not just confined to, song form necessarily and just tunes, and just cut loose and play, right? Because that's what jazz is about, that whole exploration, right? In the minds of a lot of jazz musicians, and also it's what disconnects jazz from the public to some extent. And I'm reverse of that. I'm not comfortable on jazz gigs. A lot of them I will stay away from, or they'll stay away from me. Because I'm just not like versed in some of that vocabulary, but there's some that I'll do, and it's as much as I enjoy them. I can't say this. So I'm going to say this not as an absolute now. I have to back off, because there is enjoyment in that within a boundary, but my as much as I enjoyed that, if I could only do one thing, if I could only do one other thing, I would accompany singers, and I would share that space, and I would have a consensus on a tune. I would play a tune, and I would stay in that tune. I'd live in tunes. I love that the reviewer Raul de Gama, I mentioned this I think last week, in reviewing the Blossom Deary CD, gave me the label of an exquisite interpreter of song. I wouldn't have come up with those. Those words are so perfect for how I would want to be described. If I could say, in a perfect world, if I had my wish, my dream description, what would it be? I wouldn't even realize that was it. And I want to play the tune. And so, just to say it this way, to draw the contrast, in contrast to the musician who's doing the jazz gig, who's doing this gig with the singer, but it's like wanting to do that jazz gig because they can really stretch loose. I love stretching loose, especially with certain people, and have great comfort zone and rapport with them and all that. But still, it's like when I step into an accompanying a singer thing, that's the space that really speaks to me the most. And I didn't understand that for a long time, and I think part of understanding that now is understanding myself. And accompanying also puts me in a place where I become a participant from within, as opposed to from without, where I'm looking at the music and what can I do to it, and what can I do with it, and what can I do, but rather how can I express this thing. And I think I might be spinning in circles at this point, and I'm staying here maybe long enough to have some of you scratching your heads, but I'm kind of scratching my own itch. In that I think there's a relationship between me, like, getting myself tripped up with the idea of calling Somewhere Over the Rainbow the most dangerous tune in jazz, because part of me, and I get it, but part of me saying that's not what it's about, right? And the comment that the very nice person made, that he sees the idea of leaving the melody accessible throughout the improvisation from front to back entirely all the time is a magic skill. Well, I mean, some would argue that it's a lack of certain skills. But then you would argue that the ability or the inclination to want to live there is it was interesting how that caused controversy with the one person that I talked with it about. But we all have our agendas, we all have our priorities, we all have our biases and understanding. But those two things are actually related now. Does that make any sense? I'm not sure it does to me, but it doesn't have to make sense to me for me to get it. Now, it just so happens, this may be ridiculous, and I probably shouldn't even say this, but it just so happens that I was playing C key first, in the same key, E flat, that I was playing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. I'm just going to go from one to the other and see what happens. All right, now that's interesting. So when I went to Somewhere Over the Rainbow, I think I subconsciously made this decision, okay, I want to do a little reharmonization. I don't want to play it just, I don't want to, and I would typically, but then I'm thinking about, okay, here's what I talked about, and I'll do this thing, and then a funny note showed up. And then that funny note, like, pulled my brain, right? And you probably didn't notice any of that. But the very subtle inner workings of playing music or improvising, and this is something that's becoming a real focus of my practicing. And I think it's related to, in general, the intuitive pull versus the cognitive objective. And I think within all of us there is this, and some of us are more attentive to it, and some of us live more here and don't really find this. Some of us really find this, and then some like real like, I don't want to say extreme, but you know, in Eastern thought, you kind of like let go of this completely, you know, and in Western thought, this comes back, you know, and so like esoteric Western philosophy might be more of a religion or Christianity, or might be more of a marrying of the two, where one is a letting go of this. Boy, am I getting esoteric. But the point is that, and again, everything I ever needed to know in life, I learned at the piano. So I'm learning to find the difference between what I hear, and it's like, yeah, that'd be cool, and what just happens. And finally, they were almost the same thing, and that's because, actually, when I said, yeah, I hear that, that'll be cool, I let myself play, but I wasn't playing what I heard. And I don't think I can really demonstrate this, but see, I hear, my mind went there. And once I go there, I could like go there, and I could, that's a starting point. But what if I waited? I'll play the melody. All right, phew. I had to wait a little bit, and I was a little concerned. But then at a certain point, when I let go, then my hands started going, right? And, you know, not complicated, not anything. And playing, you know, many of the same things I would have played had I thought of it. But not playing it in the way that I would have thought of it. And so there's the goal for me, right, to open up that space. Now, let's completely embrace what the musician said, that Somewhere Over the Rainbow is the most dangerous tune in jazz. Because, yeah, if, you know, 5 people let go and they're not in tune with each other intuitively, that's another subject. And they could go in different directions. But I think those different directions are like about determination. You know, now that I hear myself talk about it, I think the next goal would be for the 3 musicians, and I can tell you this absolutely was not the case on that gig, that the 3 musicians were in the same intuitive space. The 3 musicians were in 3 different spaces. And so that was the problem, wasn't it? Yeah, the tune becomes a scapegoat because that tune is a challenge, right? But so it's the most dangerous tune in jazz to be able to meet the challenge of truly locking in intuitively with the person you're with. There we go. So, with these videos, especially when something like, you know, I let the esoteric, you know, butterflies out of their pen and I let them fly around someplace where you don't expect to see butterflies. I don't know. I feel like, okay, this is the video where I just went nuts and it's not going to work. And then I, you know, in terms of the audience and you know, and then I listen to it before it goes out, and it's like, you know, no, I think it's okay. Then it, you know, then it works. one, I don't have the option of listening to it because I'm recording this just a couple of hours before you're going to see it if you watch it, immediately. But I also, I think, have to learn. No, I can't say that. That's more complicated. I was going to talk about a relationship between getting in the space with playing and getting in the space with speaking. And yeah, they are the same space, but it's also a different thing. I have to think about that some more. Am I allowed to think? Of course I am. Especially to study and learn and inform my intuition. So that at the right moment, you let go. So I think about a Bible verse where Jesus says, people are going to bring you before them. He says to his disciples, and demand accounts from you, and you can be put in the spot, and don't plan beforehand what you're going to say. The Spirit will give you the words at the time. And just, right now in the context of this, it's like you don't know. Yeah, you want to be in the moment at the time. Period, right? Period. So I guess my real problem with calling Somewhere Over the Rainbow the most dangerous tune in jazz is defining it as a jazz tune, which I'm not even sure that's what the guy meant. He might have just meant in the context of jazz. But it is a confusing tune as soon as you start reharmonizing it, and you want to reharmonize it. And everything gets sort of reharmonized to a point. But I tend to be, in the end, deferential to the melody, kind of in an absolute sense. In fact, and I've said this before, I've said many things, before at this point, that if I want to know where I am in a tune, most musicians think in terms of chords. And I can, I can call out a chord to someone who needs to know what chord it is. If I, think while I'm playing, okay, what chord is it? It's that one. But I have to go look for it because I'm not thinking in terms of the chords. I'm thinking in terms of the melody. There's a tune that was called on a gig recently. I forget which gig now. The very thought of you. And if I'm by myself, I'll play it in B flat. And my chord changes are probably not the stock changes, but that's where my ear takes me with it. And in order for me to, I can't think about what those chords are. I relate them to the melody. And then if I'm accompanying a soloist or something, and I may lose track of where I'm in the harmony, and you'll hear me very lightly playing the melody because it ties it all back. So yeah, I never do let go of the melody. So maybe I'm oversimplifying my analysis. Of course I am. Because things always go deeper than we see on the surface, or than we see ever, ultimately, right? Maybe I'm oversimplifying my analysis that the reason this person makes a comment about you can always find the melody is because I don't over reharmonize it to lose that diatonic, center. But I also always have to find the melody to know where I am. There's another subject. So this is one, maybe I'm going to get more out of this than you will. And I'll listen to it, and it'll help me sort my own thoughts. And so maybe I can just say, at this point, welcome to my brain. You're welcome, and I'm sorry. Thanks for being here. And I'll see you tomorrow for Piano for My Friends, right? Or maybe I'll see you live some point. I will say this, I've got a few more dates to put on the calendar, and I'm loving what's happening to my calendar, uh, and the direction that it's going. It looks like some traveling is coming back. There's a couple on the calendar now. Not like next week or something, but when I'm not going to be in the area, and I'll be in some other area, and another that I don't have a date for yet. So, but it's going to be in the fall. That'll go up there, and also just other applications and things in different regions. And yeah, I'm a blessed guy. I'm so thankful for all of this, and thankful that I can share it with you and that you're on this ride with me in this way. So, oh my goodness, Joe, get a cup of coffee or take a nap or do a nap. I don't need a nap, and I don't need coffee. What do I need? I need to play the piano more today. I'll do that now. Well, after I turn this camera off, go practice. See you later. Thanks so much.